The twin suns of planet Heron sank behind the silver mountains, throwing long shadows over the grand hall. Inside, hundreds of tall alien males stood in perfect rows, their silver eyes glowing under the crystal lights. At the center stood Lyra, small, fragile, and trembling. Her skin was pale blue, her hair soft white like moonlight. She was unlike any of her kind, tiny, delicate, and quiet. On Heron, where strength and power were worshipped, she was seen as a mistake. The council of males sat high above her on golden thrones. Their leader, Lord Varesh, raised his hand. "Lyra of the House of Errol," he said coldly, "you are found unfit for pairing. You bring weakness to our bloodline." The words echoed like thunder in the silent hall. Some laughed, others whispered. Lyra's heart sank. She wanted to speak, to beg, but no sound came out. She only bowed her head and whispered, "I understand." Her eyes burned as she turned away. The laughter followed her like knives in the dark. Outside the hall, the night air was sharp and cold. Lights from ships flashed above as traders and travelers filled the sky. Lyra walked alone through the spaceport streets, her small bag hanging on her shoulder. Her reflection in a glass wall looked even smaller, just another forgotten soul in a galaxy that admired only the strong. For years she had tried to prove her worth. She trained, studied, even volunteered for dangerous missions. But every time the result was the same: rejection. Too small, too weak, too fragile. The words haunted her. As she passed through, the market zone alien voices surrounded her, deep, metallic, full of pride and arrogance. None of them even looked at her. It was as if she didn't exist. She sat near the docking bay, watching ships take off one by one. Every engine trail felt like another goodbye to a life she didn't belong in. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the ground. The lights flickered, alarms wailed, and smoke rose from the far end of the port. A voice shouted from the control tower, "Human ship down! Repeat, human vessel crash landing near Zone 7. Lyra's head snapped up. A human? On Haran? That was rare. Most humans stayed far from Haran space. They were seen as reckless, dangerous, unpredictable. But curiosity burned in her chest. Without thinking, she grabbed her small scanner and ran toward the smoke. The air grew thick with heat and dust as she reached the crash site. A small craft lay broken among the rocks, its hull glowing orange from fire. Lyra coughed, covering her mouth. Through the wreck, she saw movement. Someone was inside. She hesitated. Heron law was clear. No one was to interfere with off-world creatures. But then she heard a faint voice, weak, struggling. "Help. Please." It was a man's voice. A human. Her heart raced. She looked around. No guards yet. Just her and the burning wreck. The smell of melted metal filled the air. She took a deep breath and crawled through a gap in the hull. Sparks hissed above her head. Inside, the ship was half destroyed. Panels flickered. Steam hissed. A tall figure lay trapped under heavy debris. A man in a dark flight suit, blood on his forehead. His breathing was shallow. Lyra's small hands trembled. "You're alive," she whispered. He opened his eyes slightly, deep brown, filled with confusion. You're not afraid of me?" he asked weakly. "No," she said softly. "You're hurt." She tried to lift the beam, but it was too heavy. She gritted her teeth, using a small energy tool from her belt to cut through the metal. The tool sparked brightly, lighting her face with determination. Finally, with a last push, the beam fell aside. She pulled his arm over her shoulder, helping him crawl out of the wreckage. Outside, the fires burned bright against the dark sky. The alarm still wailed. She could hear shouts in the distance, soldiers coming. "Move," she said firmly, though her voice shook. "We must go." He stumbled beside her, weak but breathing. As they reached the shadows near the cliffs, the wind blew across the barren sand. She looked at him again. His face was strange, strong jaw, rough skin, but kind eyes. So different from the cruel faces she had seen all her life. "Who are you?" she asked, He gave a faint smile. Ethan, pilot, from Earth. Earth, she whispered. I've read about it. He looked at her, confused. Why are you helping me? Your people hate humans. She paused. The flames behind them rose higher, and the sirens grew louder. She didn't know why. Maybe because she saw something in him that she had never seen before. Hope. Because, she said quietly, I know what it feels like to be unwanted. They disappeared into the night as the searchlight swept across the burning wreck. The soldiers arrived moments later, but there was no one left. Only the wreck of a human ship and footprints, one large, one small, leading into the desert shadows. The night wind swept over the dunes as Lyra dragged the half-conscious human through the sands. The twin moons lit her path with pale blue light. Each step burned her feet, and the sound of distant engines echoed behind her. The Heron patrols were already searching. Ethan's breathing was rough and uneven. His human blood left faint red trails on the pale sand. Lyra's small arms trembled from exhaustion, but she refused to stop. Just a little more, she whispered to him, even though he couldn't hear. At last they reached an old shelter carved into the rocks, a forgotten mining station left behind years ago. Its metal doors were half buried in dust but still worked when Lyra pressed her energy key. The doors slid open with a hiss and darkness welcomed them in. She laid Ethan gently on a broken cot. His face was pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. She looked around the room. Rusted tools, shattered screens, and a broken light panel. She hit it twice. The light flickered on weakly. For a long moment, she just watched him. She had never seen a human before, only heard stories, dangerous, unpredictable, emotional. But lying there he looked fragile. His hands were rough, his uniform torn, but there was something peaceful about him. Lyra took out her healing vial, a glowing blue liquid, and pressed it to his wound. He groaned softly as the nanogel spread under his skin. When he finally opened his eyes, confusion filled them. He looked around, then at her. Where am I? You're safe, she said softly. The patrols are gone. His eyes focused on her. Small, blue-skinned, silver-eyed. You saved me? Yes, she replied. Why? She hesitated. The question hung in the air like a sharp blade. Because you needed help, she said finally. He stared at her for a long time, then smiled faintly. Most aliens don't help humans. I'm not like most, she said simply. He tried to sit up, groaning in pain. Lyra placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You should rest. Her touch made him pause. It was light, almost weightless, but full of warmth. In that moment, the cold, metallic room didn't feel so empty anymore. Hours passed. The night outside turned to a gray dawn. Lyra sat near the broken door, keeping watch. She could hear distant engines and see flashes of light in the sky. The Heron ships were still searching. Ethan stirred. You've been awake all night, he said quietly. She turned to him. I don't sleep much. He chuckled weakly. You sound like me. For the first time, she smiled. A small, uncertain smile. Humans laugh even when they're hurt? It's a bad habit, he said. We do it to forget the pain. Lyra looked away. I wish I could do that. Silence filled the room again, but it wasn't empty. It felt calm. Safe. Ethan studied her. What's your name? Lyra. Lyra, he repeated, testing the sound. Pretty name. She blinked in surprise. No one ever said that before. He smiled. Then they're blind. Her cheeks turned a faint violet, the Haran color of embarrassment. She turned away quickly. You should drink water, she muttered, handing him a small container. When he took it, their fingers brushed for a moment. The touch was brief but electric, like two worlds meeting in silence. Later that day, Lyra checked the scanners. Red dots blinked closer. They're searching the desert, she said. They'll find us soon. Ethan sat up despite the pain. Then we move. Can this place still fly? He pointed at the old mining rover parked outside the door. Lyra shook her head. Its engine is broken. Then show me, he said. She frowned but obeyed. Together they went to the small garage. Ethan knelt beside the dusty engine, opening its panels with his hands. You know, he said, back on Earth, I was a mechanic. Fixing broken things is kind of my thing. Lyra tilted her head. You fix with hands, not machines? He grinned. Humans like to get dirty. She didn't fully understand, but she watched carefully as he worked, tightening bolts, connecting wires, using nothing but old tools and instinct. His confidence surprised her. Why are you smiling? He asked, noticing her expression. Because, she said, you act like it's easy. He wiped the sweat from his brow. Maybe it is, if you believe it is. That made her pause. Her people always said she was too small, too weak. Yet this human, broken and hurt, believed he could fix anything. Even now, surrounded by danger, he still smiled. By evening, the engine roared back to life. The sound echoed through the cliffs. Lyra's eyes widened in disbelief. You fixed it, she said softly. Told you, Ethan replied. I'm good with broken things. He looked at her meaningfully, and for a second she forgot to breathe. Outside, dark ships crossed the horizon. Heron scouts. They had found traces of heat in the sand. Lyra turned to Ethan, fear in her eyes. They're coming. He grabbed her hand. Then we leave. Now. As the rover sped into the night, the wind whipped through Lyra's hair. She looked at the human beside her, still bleeding, still smiling. Something inside her shifted, something warm and new. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like an outcast. The desert stretched endless under the dim red dawn. Lyra and Ethan rode the old mining rover across the dunes, its metal frame rattling with every bump. The silence between them was soft, filled only with the hum of the engine and the whisper of wind. Lyra kept glancing at the radar display. Tiny red dots flashed on the corner. Heran patrol ships. They're spreading the search wider, she said quietly. Ethan looked at the screen. Then we stay ahead of them. How far to the nearest city? 2 days, Lyra answered. But there's a small settlement hidden inside the canyon. We can rest there tonight. He nodded. Good, because if we keep going, this thing will fall apart before we reach tomorrow. Lyra smiled faintly. His humor was strange to her. Even when danger chased them, he found light. Maybe that was a human thing. They reached the canyon by evening. Shadows grew long and strange blue fireflies floated around the rocks. Inside a narrow cave, Lyra found an old camp base from ancient miners. She activated a few lights using her energy band, filling the cave with soft golden glow. Ethan sat by a small heater, his hands shaking slightly. The wound on his side still hurt. Lyra crouched beside him with gentle movements. Let me see, she said. He unzipped his uniform halfway, showing the injury. The blue healing gel she had used was fading. She opened another vial and spread it carefully on his skin. He winced, then chuckled softly. You're better than any doctor I've had. Lyra's lips curved into a shy smile. Maybe because I care more. Their eyes met, just for a second, but it felt like the air itself stopped moving. To hide her blush, she stood quickly. You should rest. Ethan leaned back, watching her pace around the cave. She was tiny, barely reaching his chest, yet there was strength in the way she moved. A quiet, steady kind of strength. He broke the silence. Back home, humans used to say that the smallest stars burn the brightest. She turned to him, curious. That sounds beautiful. It's true, he said. People might overlook you, Lyra, but I can tell. You're not weak. You're just different. Those words sank deep into her heart. No one had ever said that to her before. All her life she had been told she was a mistake. But here, From this stranger's voice came warmth, something she had long forgotten existed. Outside, the wind howled through the canyon. The faint sound of engines echoed above, heron ships flying low, searching with scanning beams. Lyra turned off the lights quickly. "They're near," she whispered. Ethan crawled closer to the wall, peeking through a crack in the rock. "We can't stay long, they'll find the heat signature." Lyra nodded. "We'll move before sunrise." As the ships passed overhead, the two sat close, their shadows blending in the darkness. Lyra could hear Ethan's heartbeat, steady, strong, so different from her kind, soft pulse. When the sound of engines faded, Ethan whispered, "You said your people hate humans. Why?" Lyra sighed. "They think humans are too emotional, too wild. You fight for things that make no sense to us. Love, loyalty, faith. We see that as weakness." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I'm proud to be weak." Lyra blinked at him. "Why?" "Because love and loyalty make life worth living," he said simply. "Without them, strength means nothing." His words stayed in her mind long after silence returned. By dawn they left the canyon, moving toward the edge of the desert. The rover's engine coughed and groaned, but Ethan managed to keep it alive. As they drove, Lyra noticed something strange. Small black drones hovering far above. "They've found us," she said in alarm. Ethan tightened his grip on the controls. "Hold on." The rover roared as he pushed it harder. Blaster beams streaked through the air, exploding around them. Lyra grabbed his arm, eyes wide with fear. "They'll shoot us down." "Not if we're smarter," he said. He turned sharply into a narrow ravine, the rover scraping against the walls. Rocks tumbled down behind them, blocking the drone's path. When they finally stopped, both were breathing hard. Lyra looked at him in shock, then laughed softly. "You're crazy," Ethan grinned. "Humans usually are." Her laugh was light and musical, the first real laugh in her life. She didn't realize until now how much she had missed the feeling. That night they camped again, under open stars this time. The galaxy stretched wide and endless above them, a river of light and color. Ethan pointed up. "That one," he said, "is the Terran Belt. My home lies far beyond it." Lyra followed his gaze. "So far away. Maybe not forever," he said softly. "Once I fix the comms, I can send a signal home." She looked at him, fear flashing in her eyes. "And then you'll leave." He hesitated. "I don't know yet." The silence between them grew thick again, filled with unspoken thoughts. Lyra turned away, hugging her knees. "Everyone leaves," she whispered. "My people. They all turned their backs on me. I thought maybe I could forget that pain. But now it's here again." Ethan moved closer, placing his hand gently over hers. "Then let me prove that not everyone leaves." She looked up slowly. His eyes, warm, human, kind, met hers. For the first time, she saw not an alien from another world, but someone who saw her truly. The morning sky glowed orange over the barren desert. The sand shimmered like gold dust, but for Lyra and Ethan it was a battlefield waiting to happen. Their small rover moved quietly along the rocky edge of the wasteland. The air felt heavy, too still, too quiet. Lyra checked the radar again. "No signals yet," she said softly, but her voice trembled. "It's strange, they stopped chasing us." Ethan frowned. "They're not gone. They're planning something." He had been in wars before, on Earth, in forgotten colonies, and now in alien space. He knew silence was the most dangerous sound. They stopped beside an old cliff station, an abandoned structure built into stone. It had broken towers, half-buried machinery, and shadows that whispered of the past. "This will do," Ethan said, climbing out of the rover. "We can hide here for a while." Lyra followed him, clutching her small scanner. The place was dark and dusty, but she could feel traces of old energy. "This used to be a mining outpost," she said. "My ancestors built these tunnels. No one comes here anymore." "Perfect," Ethan said, smiling faintly. No one but us. Inside, the air smelled of metal and dust. Ethan checked every corner while Lyra reactivated a few dim lights. A soft golden glow filled the room. Ethan worked on fixing their comms unit, hoping to find a signal or map. Lyra stood near the window, watching the distant horizon. Then she froze. A dark shadow passed across the sun. A single Heron war drone drifted through the clouds, silent, scanning the desert below. Lyra's heart pounded. "Ethan," she whispered. He looked up and followed her gaze. The drone was circling, its red sensors flashing. "Get down," he said. "They found us." The next moment, a sharp beam of light shot down from the drone, exploding near the cliff. The entire station shook violently. Dust and rocks rained from the ceiling. Lyra screamed as part of the wall cracked open. Ethan grabbed her hand, pulling her behind a support pillar. "We need to move now," he shouted. More drones appeared, 3, then 5, hovering like dark vultures. Their engines hummed and laser fire began raining down on the station. Ethan pulled out his blaster, firing back. The shots hit one drone, sending it spinning into the rocks. But the others tightened formation. Lyra crouched near a console, typing fast into the old Heron control system. "I can reroute the defense grid," she cried. "These turrets still have power." "Do it," Ethan said, firing again. Sparks flew, the heat burning the air. Lyra's fingers shook as she reconnected the old circuits. The screen flashed red, then green. Suddenly, old defense turrets along the cliff came to life, glowing blue. They rotated toward the sky and began firing bursts of plasma. The sound was deafening. 2 drones exploded in the air, raining metal across the sand. Ethan grinned. "That's my girl." Lyra blinked at him, confused, but there was no time to ask. More ships appeared on the horizon. Heron patrol carriers, dark and massive. Ethan's face hardened. "Too many. We can't stay here." Lyra bit her lip. "There's an escape tunnel below. It leads through the canyon." "Then move," he said, grabbing a small pack of supplies. They ran down the stairway as the upper levels burned. The sound of collapsing metal echoed above them. Dust filled the air. Behind them, the Heran soldiers began to land, tall figures in black armor, their glowing weapons drawn. "Search every level," one shouted. "The traitor is near." Lyra and Ethan reached the tunnel entrance just as a blaster shot hit the wall beside them. The explosion threw them forward. Ethan shielded her with his body, gritting his teeth as fire and smoke filled the corridor. "You're hurt!" Lyra cried. "Just go!" he yelled, pushing her ahead. They stumbled through the tunnel, narrow, dark, lit only by the flicker of their wrist lights. The sound of boots echoed behind them, growing closer. "Ethan!" Lyra gasped. "They're gaining on us." He looked around quickly, spotting a control panel. "Keep running," he said. "I'll slow them down." "No!" she cried, grabbing his arm. "You'll die!" He looked at her, eyes soft but firm. "You said it yourself. You know what it feels like to be unwanted." "I do too. But you gave me a reason to fight again." Her voice broke. "Don't say that, please." He smiled faintly. "Trust me." Before she could answer, he slammed his hand on the panel, sealing the door behind her. The metal barrier dropped with a heavy clang. "Ethan!" she screamed, pounding the door. She heard his voice through the comms, faint but calm. "I'll meet you at the canyon exit. Go, Lyra. Live." Tears streamed down her face as she ran through the last stretch of tunnel. The ground shook with explosions. Her chest burned with fear. When she finally reached the open canyon, she looked back. Smoke rose from the cliffs, lighting up the sky in fiery orange. "Ethan," she whispered, falling to her knees. A moment later, her wrist communicator beeped. A weak signal came through, his voice rough but alive. "Still here," he said. "Told you I'd meet you," she gasped, smiling through tears. "You fool," she whispered, clutching the device. "You're still alive." The stars shimmered softly above the gray surface of the moon of Varus, a forgotten rock floating between Heron territory and empty space. The air was thin, the light dim, But for Lyra and Ethan, it was safety, at least for a little while. The small shuttle they had stolen rested quietly near a ridge. Its hull was cracked, smoke still rising from one side. They had barely escaped the Heron patrols. The silence here was strange. No alarms, no voices, only the hum of the wind and the steady beat of their hearts. Ethan leaned against the ship, his shoulder bleeding through his torn jacket. He winced as Lyra knelt beside him, her glowing hands pressing a healing patch to the wound. "You keep getting hurt," she said softly. He smirked. "You keep saving me." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Maybe we're both foolish." "Maybe," he said, looking into her silver eyes. "But it's working so far." For a long moment they said nothing. The galaxy stretched before them, stars, endless and cold. Yet sitting beside her, Ethan didn't feel cold at all. Inside the small base they had found, dust coated everything. Old lights flickered weakly and strange symbols lined the walls. Lyra moved around, activating panels and wiping off the ancient controls. "This place was built long ago," she murmured. "A research post. My people used it to study deep space energy." Ethan sat at a cracked console, checking the ship's systems. "Can we fix the comms here?" "Maybe," she said. "If I connect the old antenna to your signal booster." They worked together quietly, side by side. Sparks flew as he connected wires, her small fingers steady despite the trembling in her hands. It felt natural, like two pieces that finally fit. After hours of work, the console flickered to life. A weak static hum filled the room. Ethan smiled. "We've got signal." Lyra stared at the screen, her expression softening and then darkening. "Wait, there's a message coming through." The screen lit up with alien letters, Heron script. She translated slowly. "Phase 2 initiated. The outcast carries forbidden energy. Capture the human. Eliminate her." Her hands froze. "They want you alive." "But they want me dead." Ethan frowned. "Why? What do they mean by forbidden energy?" Lyra stepped back, her breathing uneven. "It's something I was born with. My energy levels are different, unstable. That's why they rejected me. They said I was dangerous." He looked at her gently. "Dangerous? You risked your life to save a stranger." Tears welled in her eyes. "I never wanted this power. I only wanted to belong." Ethan stood and reached out, resting his hand on her shoulder. "You belong now." She looked up at him, startled. "With you?" He nodded. "With me." For the first time, Lyra didn't feel small or weak. She felt seen, understood. As the hours passed, the two sat together near the observation window. Outside, a million stars shimmered like tiny flames. Ethan pointed to one. "That's the Orion Gate. Humans used it to travel faster than light." Lyra tilted her head. "So beautiful. But it's so far." "Yeah," he said softly. "Everything worth reaching usually is." Lyra watched him. The lines on his face, the tired eyes, the quiet strength in his voice. She wondered how one being could lose so much and still keep smiling. "You miss your home," she said. He nodded. "I do, but lately, I'm not sure where home is anymore." She hesitated, her voice barely a whisper.
"Maybe it's not a place."
"Maybe it's a person." Their eyes met again, and this time neither looked away. The moment stretched between them like a thread of light. For once, the galaxy outside seemed to fade away. There was only warmth, only the quiet sound of two hearts beating in rhythm. Then the console beeped sharply. A red warning flashed across the screen. "Incoming signal detected." Lyra jumped up. "They found us again." Ethan ran to the window. In the distance, through the thin haze, dark Haran ships emerged from the void. 5 of them. "Can the shuttle still fly?" he asked quickly. "Not far," she said. "Its core is weak." "Then we'll make them think we left," he said. "Hide the heat signature." Lyra used her wrist device, masking their energy output. The ship scanned the area, beams of red light passing over the surface. They crouched low in the dark, holding their breath. Minutes felt like hours. The air buzzed with tension. Then slowly the ships turned away, vanishing back into the stars. Lyra let out a shaky breath. "They're gone." Ethan smiled faintly. "Told you I was lucky." She laughed, a quiet, sweet sound that made the cold base feel alive. "No," she said. "You're not lucky. You're stubborn," he chuckled. "Maybe that's why we're both still breathing." Later that night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She sat by the window watching the stars. Ethan joined her, carrying 2 cups of warm synth drink he had found. "For you," he said. She accepted it with a small smile. Humans make warmth from everything, even broken machines. That's what we do best, he replied. We find hope in ruins. She looked down at her reflection in the glass, a small blue-skinned girl who had spent her life running from who she was. Now beside this human, she felt complete. Ethan, she said softly, if they come again, you must leave me. You have a home to return to. He shook his head. Not without you. Her voice broke. Why? He looked straight into her eyes. Because you're my home now. The silence that followed was heavier than words. Lyra's heart fluttered, not with fear this time, but with something warm, deep and new. The moon of Varus was silent again, but Ethan could feel it, the calm before the storm. The old bass hummed faintly with energy, and every few seconds static flickered through the screens. Something was coming. He stood by the control room window staring at the stars. His reflection looked tired, face covered in dust, eyes red from sleepless nights. Yet there was still fire in his gaze. He wasn't done fighting. Behind him, Lyra was busy repairing the ship's energy core. Her glowing hands moved with focus, her silver eyes dimmed by worry. They won't stop, she said quietly. Heron pride will not allow a human and a reject to live free. Ethan turned. Then we'll show them what happens when they chase the wrong people. She looked up, confused. What can we do? They have fleets. We have scraps, he smiled faintly. Scraps can build miracles if you use them right. Lyra tilted her head. That sounds like something a fool would say. He chuckled. Then I guess I'm your fool. Despite everything, the fear, the danger, she smiled back. Hours passed. The scanner lit up red. A Haran cruiser had entered the moon's orbit, massive, dark, and sharp like a blade. Smaller ships detached, descending through the thin atmosphere like black meteors. Lyra's heart pounded. They're here. Ethan loaded his weapon, eyes calm. Good, she stared at him in disbelief. Good, he nodded. If they've come to end this, then I'll make sure they remember the name human forever. The first explosion shook the base. Dust rained from the ceiling. Lyra's console sparked, flickering with warnings. They're breaking through the outer walls, she cried. Then we make our stand here, Ethan said. He ran to the power core, connecting wires, rerouting systems. We can use the base's energy grid to our advantage. You said your people studied deep space energy, right? Yes, she said. This place can amplify power fields, but it's unstable. He grinned. Unstable's fine. I'm used to unstable. Outside, the Heron soldiers landed. Dozens of them, tall, armored, armed with plasma rifles. Their leader stepped forward, his voice echoing through the comms. Outcast Lyra of House Arel, surrender the human and your life will end quickly. Resist, and both of you will suffer. Lyra clenched her fists. Ethan stood beside her, facing the monitors. You know, he said softly, I've been called reckless before, but I've never been called hopeless. He tapped the final command. The base's systems came alive. Lights blazed and the floor vibrated with humming power. Ethan, what are you doing? Lyra asked, alarmed. He smiled. Teaching them something about humans. The soldiers entered the corridor. The moment they crossed the threshold, the floor plates exploded with electric bursts. The walls shifted, ceiling behind them, trapped. Ethan's voice came through the base speakers. Welcome to Earth-style hospitality. One by one, security turrets activated, firing plasma bursts that ricocheted through the hall. The Herons fired back, but the base was like a maze, designed by a human mind that understood chaos. Lyra watched him from the control room, amazed. You're not fighting them with strength. No, Ethan said, his fingers flying over the keys. I'm fighting them with stubbornness. Suddenly, a huge tremor rocked the base. The Haran leader had blasted through the side wall with a heavy cannon. Smoke filled the room as he stepped through, armor gleaming red. He pointed his weapon at Ethan. You are brave, human. Foolish, but brave. Ethan raised his blaster, but the alien knocked it away with a single hit. The impact sent him crashing into a console. Ethan! Lyra screamed, running forward, but the alien grabbed her by the throat. You carry forbidden energy, he hissed. You are the key our empire needs, she struggled, her hands glowing faintly. Ethan groaned, trying to rise. Let her go, he said weakly. The Heron sneered. She was never yours to keep. Something snapped inside Ethan. He stumbled to his feet, bleeding, furious. You're wrong, he growled. He slammed his hand on the console beside him, activating the energy core overload. Lights flared white. The hum grew deafening. Lyra gasped. Ethan, no. The heron released her, turning in alarm.
"What have you done?"
Ethan's voice was calm now. "Given you a lesson in humanity. We don't quit, even when we lose." The core pulsed brighter and brighter until Lyra stepped forward, her eyes glowing with the same light. "Ethan," she said softly, "let me help." She placed her hands over the console. Her energy merged with the core, stabilizing the explosion just enough to redirect it outward. The blast tore through the base, a blinding wave of blue-white light that sent the Heron ship spinning away into orbit. When the light faded, silence fell. The entire ridge was scorched, the sky filled with drifting metal. Ethan lay on the floor, barely conscious. Lyra crawled to him, her energy flickering weakly. You did it," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "No, we did." She held his hand tightly, tears in her eyes. "You could have died." He looked at her softly. "If it meant you'd live, it'd be worth it." Her voice broke. "You humans are so strange." "Yeah," he whispered with a weak grin. "That's why the galaxy can't understand us." The wind blew through the ruins, carrying dust and sparks into the sky. Lyra looked up at the stars and for the first time, she didn't feel small. Ethan had shown her something no heron ever could. Courage born from love, not power. The ruins of the Varus base lay silent beneath the pale starlight. Smoke drifted from the shattered towers, glowing softly under the moon's thin atmosphere. Amid the wreckage, Lyra sat beside Ethan, his head resting against her shoulder. He was alive, but weak. His skin was burned in places, his uniform torn, his breathing shallow. Yet his hand still held hers tightly, refusing to let go. Lyra brushed his hair back gently, her fingers trembling. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. "You say that every time I save you?" Tears glimmered in her eyes. "Maybe because you keep trying to die doing it." He laughed softly, coughing afterward. "Can't help it. It's kind of a human thing." Her chest ached as she looked around. The base was gone, the Heron fleet scattered, but victory felt heavy, painful. "They'll come again," she said quietly. "They always do." Ethan looked up at her, his gaze steady despite the pain. "Then we'll make them regret it." Lyra lowered her eyes. "They won't stop until they have me. You saw the message. They want my energy. They think I'm a weapon." "You're not a weapon," he said firmly. "You're the reason I'm still breathing." She wanted to argue, but his words silenced her heart. As dawn crept across the moon's surface, Lyra's wristband flashed red. "They've deployed something new," she murmured. "A ship larger than any I've seen." Ethan stood slowly, using the wall for support. "Show me." On the hollow screen, a massive Haran flagship appeared in orbit. Its shape was like a dark crescent, its engines pulsing with power. It glowed with stolen energy. Her energy. "They're using the same frequency as mine," Lyra realized, voice shaking. "They built it from the data they took from the crash site." Ethan clenched his fists. "So that's their plan. Use your power to destroy everything they can't control." Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "If I link to that ship's core, I can shut it down. But the link will burn me out." He turned sharply. "No, we'll find another way." "There isn't another way," she said softly. "If they fire that weapon, entire colonies will vanish. Including your world, Ethan." He looked at her. The small alien who had once been cast out by everyone, now ready to sacrifice herself to save them all. His throat tightened. "Lyra, please." She smiled faintly. "You humans always said love is strength, not weakness. Let me prove it." Hours later, they boarded the small shuttle again, damaged but still functional. The engines groaned as it lifted off, breaking through the thin atmosphere toward the dark sky. Through the cockpit glass, the Heron flagship loomed ahead, enormous, alive with energy. Its weapons began to glow, charging for the first strike. Ethan gripped the controls tightly. "Just tell me what to do." "I'll connect to the core," Lyra said, attaching cables to her wristband. "But someone has to get me close enough." He looked at her, a quiet fire in his eyes. "Then let's give them a show." The shuttle sped forward, weaving between defense drones and laser fire. Explosions lit the void like fireworks. Ethan's reflexes were sharp, every move born from pure human instinct. Lyra closed her eyes, focusing her energy. Her hands glowed brighter and brighter. "Almost there," she whispered. "Hang on," Ethan said, voice tight. "Just a little longer." A direct hit struck the shuttle, throwing them sideways. Sparks burst from the controls. Lyra screamed as she slammed into the wall. "Lyra!" Ethan shouted, rushing to her side. She gasped, clutching the cables. Keep going." Ethan's hands trembled. "Not without you." Her silver eyes met his, soft, desperate, filled with love. "You have to trust me, please." He hesitated, then nodded. The shuttle spun toward the flagship's hull. At the last second, Ethan released the escape pod with her inside, launching it straight at the glowing core section. The pod hit hard. Lyra stepped out, surrounded by blinding light. She could feel the pulsing of her own energy, mirrored inside the ship's weapon. "Access granted," the AI voice hummed. Lyra closed her eyes and reached out, merging her power with the core. Energy surged through her veins like fire. The ship's system screamed in alarm. From his cockpit, Ethan watched helplessly. "Lyra, what's happening?" Her voice came through the comm, faint but calm. "It's working. The weapon is collapsing. Then come back," he shouted. She smiled sadly. "I can't. If I disconnect now, it'll restart. Tell me, Ethan, was it worth it? Meeting a girl from another world?" His voice broke. "It was the best thing that ever happened to me." Her lips trembled. "Then that's enough." The core flared white. A wave of light spread across the sky, washing through the Heron fleet like a silent storm. One by one, their ships powered down, lifeless, drifting. The flagship cracked apart, releasing fragments of silver and flame into the void. And then, silence. Hours later, Ethan's shuttle drifted among the wreckage. His hands shook as he scanned the debris. "Come on, Lyra." "Where are you?" The radar beeped in a faint signal. A small life pod floated nearby, covered in frost. He pulled it aboard and opened it carefully. Inside lay Lyra, unconscious but breathing. Her glow was faint, but her heart still beat. Ethan knelt beside her, tears falling silently. "You did it," he whispered. "You saved everyone." Her eyes opened slowly. "Not everyone," she murmured. "Just the one who mattered most." He laughed softly through his tears. "You never stop surprising me. I learned from a human," she whispered with a weak smile. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the light of distant stars filled the cockpit. Outside, the galaxy was quiet, peaceful for the first time in decades. Two small figures drifted together through the starlight, bound not by power or blood, but by love that had crossed every distance imaginable. Lyra looked at the stars, whispering, "Once I was rejected by every male in the galaxy." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "And yet the universe still led you to me." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. Maybe love was the real energy they feared. He nodded, gazing into the endless sky. "Then let's keep proving them wrong." The stars reflected in their eyes. Two souls, one human and one alien, glowing together in a universe that had finally learned what it meant to feel.